When you have this chakra down, your frequency changes. Okay, nothing is static in your body. Let's say you close solar plexus, you close the sacral, you close the root. You're tapping into the parts of your body that are connected to the physical. You need to open the heart, the throat, and the third eye, because this is you, again, bringing the body into coherence, into a higher auth. The body is organized in 3 Dantian systems. Dantian just means collection of energy. The first 3 chakras are the collection of energy that master the physical.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious of the brain to get the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality. Whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Geraldine Orozco is an international educator and researcher whose work pioneers a comprehensive model of biospiritual anatomy and consciousness-based healing. With a background in hypnotherapy and trauma transformation, she specializes in the bioelectrical communication networks that shape cognition, behavior, and human evolution. Her proprietary DNA reprogramming method combines epigenetics, ancestral lineage studies, and multidimensional psychology to resolve psychosomatic patterns at their root. Through her training programs and global presentations, Geraldine provides evidence-informed methodologies for the regulation of the nervous system, expansion of perception, and reintegration of fragmented identity structures. Geraldine's media and film features, along with her leadership at the Academy of Light, contribute to a global academic dialogue bridging neuroscience, quantum biology, and spiritual anthropology. Her work demonstrates how creative life force can be consciously cultivated to restore internal harmony and support the highest expression of human consciousness. Please support Geraldine's work on YouTube and visit her website, links in the show notes.
I'm Geraldine Orozco, and you're listening to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
That was Geraldine, who is tonight's guest. We're going to talk about the energetics of manifestation.
Just really quickly, I'm an epigenetic psychotherapist, and I primarily focus on the energetic psychology and the psychology of energy, essentially. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we embody that? And I became pretty intuitive after an incredible life-changing experience in 2013, and that allowed me the ability to kind of see the multidimensional body and the ins and outs of how our psychic aspects are affecting our everyday creative lives, how we create a life. I went through many, many phases in my life of deep depression coming into, manifestation. For me, the biggest tool was meditation. Meditation was at the core foundation of all of that because it allowed me to understand the mechanics of how we manifest, how we create, how we pull ourselves out energetically from stagnant states of creation or counter creation, as I call them, into states of co-creation. And so today I really wanted to talk about that topic, the energetics of depression, the energetics of blockages, and how we become blocked essentially in our manifestation. We can start essentially by talking a little bit about blockages and how do we become depressed. I think a lot of what the human is dealing with is a stagnation of their own deep understanding of themselves. And whenever we become blocked, there's a disconnect, and it's primarily a disassociation with what is happening in your life, what you're feeling, what you're knowing to be true, and what you're experiencing in life. And the invitation, and I see this time and time again after working with people for many years now, listening to countless different stories from the most incredible, horrific life experiences to the most amazing, transformative experiences, what we begin to understand is that we are very much in control of how we perceive the things that we're going through. And there is a way to, in a sense, biohack psychologically and physically how we respond to these experiences. And so the first way of doing that is to be able to identify first the block that you're experiencing. And that requires kind of a state of awareness, kind of returning back to the body, being in a state of stillness and reconnection with the self, so that you can observe all the things that feel stuck. And the most difficult part is feeling really powerfully strong emotions. We get stuck with feeling emotions that we just keep looping through, repeating and repeating and repeating. So the invitation is really that we take some time to sit with those emotions and allow whatever is being suppressed to kind of come to the surface. This is where you're going to meet the second part of this transformative journey in the biohacking process, that once you meet these strong emotions, what do you do with them? You know, you feel them so strongly in the body, and most people want to avoid that feeling. They want to run away because the beliefs that start getting triggered by those emotions are too overwhelming to process. You might be feeling feelings of anger, despair, overwhelm, confusion, just absolute disconnect. It's literally within sitting with those emotions and naming out what is underneath them, that there's an entire outline of the emotions that we feel. And so we can actually, when we name out those emotions, each one of those emotions in the order that you name them out is how you have been programmed, how you programmed yourself, and how you process trauma. So you can learn a lot about how you hold emotions, how you created your perceptions, simply by sitting with these emotions, really, really big emotions, and just naming out the emotions. So you might start off with a lot of confusion, and that confusion can really feel like, you know, you're suffocated, you can't breathe, you can't, you know, your heart is just racing. And just sitting with those uncomfortable feelings, you begin to notice, okay, I'm really scared and I'm very overwhelmed. And underneath that is a powerful feeling of shame. And you're not quite sure why you feel those emotions, but this is the goal. You literally went through a process of experiencing a shameful trauma that made you feel fearful. Again, the first disassociation. And then you went into a fractalization of your perception, where you started to feel this hopelessness, this disconnect from the body, and overwhelm. So the trick to bringing the body back to its core center is to acknowledge those emotions, feel them completely. I think people are terrified of feeling emotions because when they feel an emotion, again, it's a combination of feelings in the body, sensations, thoughts, memories that just become too much for someone. But if you allow yourself to observe what is happening to that emotion in the body, so you observe the tension in the neck, then you observe it and it's going to drop down in the stomach area. And then you're going to feel it in the tightness in your abdomen. And that's how the muscle memory of your body has stored your experiences. So it would just require you to go into that part of your body and feel fully what's there. And what it means to process an emotion completely is to allow yourself to move from just the feeling and an experiencer of the emotion to the observer of the emotion. And that's usually, it's the hardest part because it feels very abstract. You know, it feels very, it's not something that feels tangible or that you can control. So this is one of the first elements of learning to kind of work with the ego part of yourself, the one that wants to control, the part of yourself that wants to, be in survival and avoid further suffering. This is the part that we have to nurture into kind of taming that wild part of us to come into that stillness of feeling fully that discomfort. And Every time that you allow yourself to feel an emotion fully, you're going to realize that emotions are not as terrifying, as scary as they might seem. They actually dissipate in the body very quickly. It's actually the resistance of feeling all of those uncomfortable sensations, thoughts, emotions, everything that comes up that prolongs the feeling of the trauma, prolongs the pain, prolongs the suffering. So the invitation is that if you can observe an emotion, and how I trained myself to do that in the beginning is by learning, training myself to watch myself in meditation, by putting myself outside of myself and just watching myself sitting on my bed or on my couch floor, wherever I am, and just watch how my facial expressions shift and move. Feel and watch at the same time how my body is responding to those emotions. And it's a really, really powerful practice because you start to learn a lot about yourself. And you also begin to notice how you become more contracted with certain emotions and how you become more expanded. So energetically, all trauma is essentially us in the filing cabinet of the mind and of the memories. We essentially have reached an experience that we can't pull out a file and apply it to the experience. And this causes a major distortion because we feel that we don't have the tools, we don't have the know-how or the understanding how to handle what has happened. It's the profound feeling of not knowing how to manage the unknown. And this, on an existential level, on a much larger level, is really the entire human experience. When we train ourselves to navigate the unknown in a compassionate way, in a grounded way, an observant way, any experience in our life can actually be something that we grow from, we learn, and that we are enhanced from. But anytime that we start to look at our experiences as something completely disconnected from us, outside of ourselves, we compartmentalize, we judge, we fear, we try to separate ourselves from certain kinds of feelings, emotions, and experiences. That's when we start to have a pretty deep fractalization in the body. And what that looks like in our physical body is essentially a distortion of energy. So the human body, it's really interesting. The human body is a toroidal energy system. As you can see, I love this little toy because it's a perfect demonstration of how our energy body function. This is the energy system. It's a toroidal field that revolves our entire body. And any time that we come into a traumatic experience, this contracts completely. And it contracts in such a way that we start to create tears and holes in our energetic space. And every time that we experience a traumatic experience from these tears and holes, the center column of this is made up of a really intelligent, self-organizing system of energy from lowest to highest. And so the root chakra, your chakra energy system, is really your endocrine system. The endocrine system is responsible for producing all the most important chemicals and hormones in the body that bring the body into stasis. And so anytime that we start to become blocked in a perception of an emotion, those chakras are changing. They're either expanding or contracting. And remember that everything in the universe is kind of functioning in a fractal form. So as above, so below. The same way that this body is a toroidal system, each of your chakras is a toroidal system. And so these chakras are supposed to be spinning fluidly. And eventually, when they come into harmonic order, when we are more in alignment with natural order, like the earth, we come into coherence with the earth, for example, they start to braid energy through the body because they are moving in the direction of the feminine and masculine energies. These dualistic energies are bringing them into balance. And therefore, energy can braid and move through the body, the center column specifically, in a very fluid manner. The result of that fluidity in the body is a super advanced immune system a super advanced intuitive capacities that transcend the five senses that we have. And it allows the body to come into, tap into the field of consciousness, which is essentially the source, the infinite source of everything that you need, want, desire, manifestation. So if you can imagine, there's an architecture to us, to how we function. The spiritual biology of our physical body is so complex and so beautiful. But when you learn and you understand it, and you begin to identify those distortions in your energetic body and bring them back into balance, you begin to experience profound shifts very quickly. And because everything is energy, you have to remember that this toroidal energy system of information, it's a bioelectrical system of conductivity. We have a piezoelectric system in the body, and the transduction process is any time you transform a lower frequency emotion into a higher frequency emotion through the means of the heart, which is love and compassion in the body. Love is the most alchemizing energy frequency in this entire universe, because love is not an emotion. It is a reorganizing back into order. So whenever we move out of any one emotion and you come into love, you are immediately reorganizing the entire energy system. So it helps a lot to train the body to feel love. Okay, so I mentioned love is not an emotion. So what do I mean when I say feel love? There's certain steps to that. And what I'm going to share with you is something that is an architecture to biohacking the body into feeling love, which is proven amongst every dimension, and working with any kind of trauma that I've worked with in the past 20 years now, from sexual abuse to emotional trauma, parent issues, existential issues, spirit, higher self disconnect. Emotions are frequencies, and each emotion has a specific, frequency. Like it's a hertz of frequency that we're holding in the body. And so those patterns create these neural pathway memory. And the neural pathway memory, not only is it in the brain of how we may sustain emotions and memories, but it's also in the physical body. So the fascia of the body, when we're mostly made of water, and that's really important to understand. So in this bioelectrical system, water is something that allows the electricity to flow fluidly through the body. You become more electric, bioelectric, more conductive when you have lots of water in the body. That's one element. The second element is that what produces electricity is a couple of things. It's movement, it's physical movement, but it's also emotional movement. Okay. So again, what did we say about depression? Depression is when we are disassociated from the body. We want to resist feeling emotions, resist accepting our experiences. So that's a stagnation. And so what happens in this beautiful energetic body that is innately constantly moving is that it becomes stagnant. And so any one emotion that you're feeling that you're stuck in, it stagnates the movement of that life force in the body. And especially when we're stuck in belief systems, like we have a traumatic experience, we just keep repeating the story over and over and over and over again. Every thought that you have, every emotion, it becomes essentially like a glue in your energy field. And I'm using a symbolism, but it's also an etheric truth. Literally, we begin to form energetic, like sluggish stagnation in the body, and they bind to more than one dimensions of the body. So an example, the root chakra being the house of safety and security. As a child, we were abandoned by the father, and now we feel it's difficult for us to find any stability. It's difficult for us to feel safe in our body. And so what happens essentially is that the root chakra starts to slow down in its movement. When we're children, everything is flowing. That's why a lot of children are very intuitive. They're psychic. They can see things. They have imaginary friends. They They're very connected to that emotional state. But external experiences begin to block that and make them doubt that connection. So in the root chakra, starting to move slower and slower, that chakra, and that trauma, that experience, since they can't process it, they don't know how to process it, it now becomes what we call a marker memory. That marker memory is programmed in the body. Imagine yourself kind of like the tree. You know how trees have rings of a tree? Every single ring is an entire, century. It's an era. It's a certain time and space. We can map out the weather patterns of that time, the environment of that person. So in the same way, we store that in our field, in the morphogenetic field. The morphogenetic field is the entire field, which is essentially, it's a library of information that brings your body into form. So it follows laws of the universe, laws of flow to organize the body into this energetic order to create your physical body. So in the root chakra, this program starts to slow down, and now your life force, which is supposed to be a column of light that goes down to the center core of the body, now it can't move through. It starts to get blocked. And so if the child isn't connected with and taught to feel that emotion and to connect with what's happening, they're just going to store that in the body, and it's going to be part of the foundation of their personality. What is a personality? A personality is a survival mechanism. They're programs that we hold on to, which we believe help us survive in our social circles, in our relationships, in the world. So these become hard to break because a lot of times they create such a strong filter of perception that it becomes impossible to look outside of our belief system. So this is where we start to develop the potential experience of depression. And in order to move out of depression, we have to move away from that filter of perception, which means we have to go in and access those emotional states that, let's say, that stagnant emotion in the root chakra that made us feel helpless or powerless, and unpack that. And when we access the root of that emotion, let's say it was a feeling of loneliness and disconnect and abandonment from the father, we would need to understand what would it look like to inform ourselves on how to navigate that experience in a way that is productive. And the funny thing is that when I work with children, they are so fast. They know the answer immediately. They know, and it's incredible, even very complex issues. I have these two beautiful little kids, two brothers, that sometimes they compete against each other, and one of them feels that they're loved more by the parents than the other. And it's very interesting, but the one that felt that way was able in a session to observe that the other brother felt exactly the same way. And these are not things, these are just by looking back at the same experience he had in the playground at home with mom and dad, he was able to understand that. And the information is in the field, and it just requires us to pause and look. And this child was able to access immediately that he needed to have compassion for his brother and himself, because it really didn't have anything to do with either of them. It had to do with the environment at home, which is out of their control. Yet they have all the tools to live a happy childhood. And ever since that moment, the child now is joyful. They can play, they can be happy. He understood what was needed, and therefore letting go of this illusion of suffering that he's held on to for many years. And what is he, only 7 or 8 years old? So, it's really amazing. It's the same for adults. And sometimes with adults, we have it's difficult. It's more difficult for us because we've gone an entire lifetime without feeling love or compassion or peace. In my journey, it wasn't until maybe my 25 years that I began to even begin to question what really was love. What does that actually feel like? What does that look like? And when I allowed myself to explore and learn the real understanding of love, that's when I started to uncover, my own lack of love, observed in my family bloodline where love was missing, so on and so forth. So these are things that are so fundamental to us. And when we lack the understanding and we don't allow time for us to reconnect to those parts of us, we are operating at less than a quarter of our potential. I mean, less than a quarter of our potential. The human has the most incredible ability to tap into manifestation and co-creation by accessing this energy system.
Is it really true that it's harder for people to change once they reach a certain number of years?
No, it's not at all. It really depends on, well, a couple of things. First of all, in this journey, your pursuit of truth has to be pretty strong, because if you're doing this just as a spiritual idea, if you have an ideology of your spirituality or happiness and joy, this journey really requires resilience, in that you are going to be motivated to discover your truth, and you're going to be committed to finding your truth. Because if you're not ready for your truth, or you're still trying to avoid truth, it's going to take you long, and you're going to be blocking yourself from seeing that. So that's the first step. Number two, that being said, be ready to get out of your comfort zone, and everything that you have known to be true, essentially be ready to let that go. I think one of the number one reasons why we are afraid to go into our subconscious and make real changes is that we're afraid of the comfort that we're going to be in. So that means relationships that might be toxic, that need to change, partnerships, jobs, bosses, interaction with colleagues that are toxic, not good for you. We have been brainwashed in this society to believe that we have to just pull through whatever is happening without being aware of how much free will we actually have in our lives. The fact of the matter is, and that's something that the entire world is, we're just at the very beginning of understanding that. Over the next 10 years, the world will go through a transformation that will force us to question those things. And it already started in 2020. We've already started having those kinds of questions. So right now, if you're willing to make changes in your life for the better of yourself, what will motivate you to make them and sustain them? And this is the third part, which is essentially we are on a journey of love. We are starting a journey to learn to love yourself. In order to move out of depression, in order to move out of pain and suffering, we have to be willing to feel love. And it's not for something outside of us, it's for yourself. So it requires radical self-acceptance. And this is something that a lot of adults, we struggle with, because we might have years, right? Decades of being told that we're not good enough, or, being doubted, or doubting ourselves specifically. And one of the difficult things to realize is that we are the ones that have to give ourselves permission. We are the ones that have to love. We are the ones that have to meet our needs. It's very important to understand that. I think what at the end it requires is kind of a maturing. We're kind of going through a spiritual maturity, where before we have this idea that everything has to come from the outside, and people owe us, our parents owe us certain behaviors, our partners owe us certain things, this community owes us certain things because we've done the things that supposedly we're supposed to do. That is all an illusion. Those are constructs that we have to dissolve in our mind. And what is on the other side of that is yourself. So we have to cultivate ourselves to become our best version of our mother towards ourselves, best version of our father towards ourselves, best caretaker, best, support, guide, spiritual guide. I think we are recovering from the trauma of not being able to trust ourselves, and that's really what would be the next step after looking at these aspects. Can you love yourself enough to build forgive yourself for the things that you've done that you feel that you were not good for you or you judged. And from there, building integrity with yourself. And that means that you call yourself out, you hold yourself accountable for every thought that you're thinking, every emotion that you're feeling, and then every action that you're taking. Because again, all of those things are bioelectrical inputs into the system, which immediately you become a magnet energetically for the things that you need to attract, things that you need in your life. And it's really, really amazing. I have tested and exercised this theory, this concept many times, and I've seen it in my students. Every day I see it with my students. But when we allow ourselves to come into harmonic order, into coherence with the earth, you immediately begin to become more conductive, and this energy system begins to spin, and you begin to come into a state of deep co-creation. So, yeah, it's not hard at all for any human at any age. What I do notice is that children, because they are less programmed, it's easier for them to have the emotional understanding. It surprised me at first when I started working with children, because I thought, this child, they don't have the experience with love to be able to understand how to access that love. And I was very wrong. Because immediately when we came to a choice point where they needed to choose love, they always knew to choose love innately. And it's a beautiful lesson that we have the information within us. It's not about age. It's about allowing yourself to tap into what is an absolute truth. And the absolute truths of the universe are encoded in nature. They are all around us. What do I mean with that? The balance of nature, the ebb and flow of nature, creation, destruction, releasing, absorbing. These are fundamental laws that are programmed into us down to a DNA level. And so we basically have to get out of our own way in order to be in stillness, to learn how to speak that language. And that translates into your emotions, your actions, thoughts, all these areas. So it's really just us getting out of our own way.
It's really just getting out of your own way. Do you think that children just have less reinforcement loops happening? How can a person break that pattern if they're stuck in this reinforcing loop?
Yeah, I think that children, they have less programming. Exactly. That's what it is. Because when I work with adults, it's so interesting. It takes sometimes layers. First problem is that we are not used to feeling our emotions. We're disconnected. We're disassociated from the body. So a couple of red flags that I see when we're doing this kind of energy work. Number one, a person can't name what they're feeling. They can't describe it. They can't name it out. And so I discovered this in myself when I was first doing this work with myself, that I didn't even know what to call what I was feeling. And that is a huge disconnect. What that looks like energetically is like an entire part of your body is just invisible to you. It's dark. You cannot connect to that. It's in the deep subconscious. And what makes a human come into ascension or illumination or harmony is awareness. That's the thing. It's awareness. Awareness of your whole self and your whole body, awareness of everything you're feeling, and that you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, and you know how you're doing it. In our world, everything becomes externalized because our attention is drawn by whatever it is outside of us. And we have to train ourselves biochemically, because we're addicted to that, to draw our attention inward, to have silence. And so, number one, naming out the emotions. And so a couple of things I would suggest: make a list of the emotions that you feel in your body, that you know, that you're familiar with. And then get a dictionary, emotional dictionary. I have these lists of emotions on my website that you guys can access, but it's a list of all possible emotions. And one powerful technique is to sit in meditation and go down that list and notice how your body responds whenever you find an emotion. If you don't know the definition of the emotion, have a dictionary with you and see that. and then notice how your body responds. This is so powerful because what we don't realize is that emotions are the human language of the universal language of energy and frequency. Emotions are different ranges of frequency. Imagine a spectrum of a rainbow. And so the majority of human race is operating in just a small little slither of the rainbow, because that's all they know. We know survival, we know pain, we know suffering, we know fear. We don't always know joy. I have so many clients that when I tell them come into joy, they're like, I don't know what that feels like. I've never really felt that. I felt peace. I felt, maybe happiness once in a while. But that is a problem. And that is an element that we have to re-educate ourselves. We have to re-educate society to stop taking their attention from TVs and movies and music so that they can connect to the body and really understand themselves in terms of frequency. And then secondly, we don't realize that 50% of our power is learning how to manage energy. And so I mentioned that in the ways to heal ourselves, there's two ways: in the energy body, and the other way is through the emotions. So what I've been talking about so far is in the emotions. We can also heal the energy body. I was mentioning earlier how in the toroidal field, we manifest blocks in the body that become difficult to dissolve. However, in a 15-minute energetic hygiene meditation, you can visualize your field and take this, whatever it looks like, and dissolve it. There, you can use either white light or gold light, which is the highest neutral frequencies. And you utilize your seventh chakra. Your seventh chakra is the portal to the higher self. It's the dimensional level of your higher self, of your body. This is dormant for most people. Most people, they don't even get up here to the throat. They don't even really get up to these chakras. And they are the basic energy centers of our human life. So we have to proactively learn how to open, contract, and expand our chakra bodies, because our chakra bodies are filters of perception. They're connected to the endocrine system. They're connected to the fascia, connected to the muscles, all of the nervous system. They're connected to even our blood flow. So when these become blocked or distorted with illnesses and sicknesses, the entire system is out of balance. So we can learn how to expand and contract the chakra system and bring the body immediately into balance. We can immediately come into the 0 point. The 0 point is accessed by shrinking the first 3 chakras. Why? Because the majority of us, we have our first 3 chakras super either overactive or blocked and underactive. And these first 3 chakras are the access point to the material realm, this entire matrix. They manage everything that you experience around you. So it's a really big deal. And in order for us to actually transmute and shift our perception, we got to clean up. So I call it reading state. And essentially the body looks like a martini glass. You close the first 3 chakras, you open the top 3, the heart, right? Because the heart is the largest magnetic field in your body. It's connected to all of your major vagus nervous system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. It has its own neural system of memory in the body. And in order to immediately come out of depression and pain, you want to expand your heart. You'll notice you won't be able to sustain those emotions of pain and suffering very long. You expand the throat, you expand the third eye, and you expand your crown, the higher self. When you open these channels, you are mechanically bringing your body into a state of intuition. And so what happens is that you can see things as they really are. And you begin to see your energetic body, and you're going to start to see, feel, sense, know that you have heaviness in the body, holes, tears in your energetic field. So the next step is to clean that. That's the energetic healing. You visualize white light, you use this crown light, you shine it on top of all the blockages that you sense, feel, and know are in your space, and you dissolve them. because the body is a toroidal energy system, remember, plus and minus, this is a toroidal energy system that's spinning. You can use that flow to clean the body. And so we have a center cord in the center of the body. We have several different layers of cords that we have, but the most important is your source channel, which is the connection to source, to infinite potential. And you can create a grounding cord that connects your body to the earth. Why? Because the more you come into coherence with the planet Earth, remember the planet Earth also looks like this. The planet Earth is oscillating in a frequency that immediately brings the brain into alpha state. Alpha state is the state of meditation, observation, and neutrality. Okay, so super important to biohack the body is to ground yourself, come into coherence with the earth, and immediately bring the body into that coherence. Okay, so we can do this mechanically when you're at home in a cement building, but you can also do it naturally by going into a forest and connecting to the earth. That does the same thing to your body. Okay, but we're not able to be in the forest all the time. So we got to learn how to do it in our everyday moment right here, right now. So that grounding cord that we create, connecting the body down to the center of the earth, you're going to utilize this like a channel of illumination, that you take that blockage and you can dissolve it. Use your imagination. Imagination is designed for energy work. It's not designed for fantasy. And it also doesn't mean that you're making things up. This is the biggest programming indoctrination that we've received as a human race. We have to understand that utilizing your crown to dissolve these things in the body, clear your energetic space. They remove emotions. Now, I mentioned the two ways. The most long sustaining way, the actual way to reprogram your mind, is the deep emotional work. Because what you do with emotional work, when you unpack this memory of emotions, you're reprogramming your mind epigenetically. You're changing the emotional environment of your DNA. And that changes ancestral patterns. That's a really huge thing to remember. But to do it energetically, you can clean the body to support that healing. And so remember that this work it's not something you do one time and that's it. It is something that has to be continuous. And that I call it energetic hygiene, because every morning that you wake up, bring yourself into balanced state. So we only go into the martini when we're meditating. When you're done meditating, you bring yourself back into alignment. You open those chakras and you clean them. You clean them by spinning them really fast. You can imagine white light, again, from the crown into that chakra to clean out everything. The chakras, it's like this. It's a toroidal energy system. And you can imagine every single one of these little lines is like a petal. And they are organized within frequencies, the chakra itself, from lowest to highest. So oftentimes, most people, their chakra is going to look like it's missing a lot of petals. They're all contracted. They're all contracted in the body. So we have to bring that chakra back into balance. This represents your thoughts of that frequency. Okay, so in the root chakra, the main energies are survival, safety, security. So if you're constantly feeling in fear, it's because these chakra systems are out of balance. You bring them back and your perception shifts. That's how we function. So this is how to biohack energetically the body into that state of harmonic order. And there's also another side. The chakras have a front and a back. The front of the body is the masculine. The back of the body is the feminine. The feminine it's the receiver. It represents the occult, the hidden, the subconscious. And the masculine is the receiver, the action, the manifestation. So you can understand pretty clearly by reading your chakras, and everybody can do this. If one side feels more blocked or contracted than the other, you can really understand where your perception is skewed. Okay. So if it's the back of the body, it usually represents the feminine, and it represents the connection to the intuitive, to the spiritual self. And you can understand that your safety is the lack of your safety is a lack of connection to your higher self or to your internal self. right? When it's in the front of the body, it's a lack of safety and connection with the external aspect of yourself. So, there's many layers to how we function, but this, as a healer, as the work that I do, I don't like to call myself a healer, but as a person that facilitates an understanding of the body, I learned this by just meditating myself and learning how we function. And everybody can do it. Anybody can learn that.
So who does the healing? Just for those who need to hear it.
You do the healing. Always.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
You always do the healing.
Is there any cautionary advice that you could give about wanting to do the energetic work too fast? Because it's a process.
It's definitely a process. Yeah. So there's nothing that happens fast. Because if you're doing it too fast and just, the reason why you're doing it is not real. It's like a fantasy, it's not actually happening. I think that's why every student that works with me, I tell them your pursuit has to be one or two. Either you're pursuing love or you're pursuing truth. They all lead to the same end goal, but most people, they're afraid to pursue those things. And so this is not a work for somebody that is just going to half-ass. You just won't get anywhere. It's basically won't get anywhere. And also, you're not going to believe in yourself. You're not going to feel any results in yourself. So, it's definitely a process. Yeah. But I would definitely say that I think once you learn the proper way of doing things, and what I mean by that is not like specific techniques, but there's a certain mindset that one cultivates in order to be able to do this kind of work. And I think once we cultivate that mindset, then it becomes pretty clear how to do it, how and why.
Okay, so I was going to ask you at the end of what you said to just kind of answer the question for someone that might be wondering, what is the best way for me to confront my emotions in a safe way? Because I find that that's one of the most frequent questions I get asked. So for example, someone comes to me and I give them a session and they say, okay, yeah, that was great. That benefited me, but I'm scared to do that on my own, or I don't know how to do that on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I literally tell my students to grab a notebook and just in the notebook, when you're sitting, so there's different ways to meditate. And at first, you can just write down the emotion. So let's say the first emotion is anger. And it's so strong, it feels like it's just going to overcome you, the anger. Again, it's really important to support the body with the energetic elements because otherwise you can, lose track. And so that's why we practice the technique of grounding ourselves. So you need to come fully into the body. And I usually tell my students that you're going to be training Vipassana-like meditation for at least 3 months before you start really diving into the emotional body. Why? Because we need to train the nervous system to come into homeostasis and to learn to regulate. Because when people have a lot of trauma, they are super dysregulated. Meditation feels impossible. Feeling and sitting with the emotion feels overwhelming. You just can't sit still. You can't even access insights because you got so much going on biochemically. You're an energetic being. So grounding, you have to ground yourself in the body, not just because it's an imagination, because it brings the brain into alpha state. And that's like half the battle. Half the battle right there is that you bring the brain into alpha state. Number 2, come into reading state in your meditations. And when you close the first 3 chakras, what also happens is that when you're quieting down all the noise and all the static that's happening in your body. So for example, let's say the anger is so strong. Where is it? It's in your abdomen, and it's so strong in the abdomen that, your stomach can hurt or you feel nauseous. It's so overwhelming. So when you shrink the chakra, so shrinking the chakra doesn't mean that you're going to stop it from moving. So these chakras are spinning like this all the time. So it's overexpanded like this. Okay, so right now you're super angry. Your solar plexus is super angry. It's just taking over your entire perception. You can't see anything but this anger. And so when you shrink it down, it's like you're quieting the chakra down. And you want to shrink it down to the size of a dime or to a marble. Okay, for international people that don't know dime is just like a coin, right? So a tiny little coin. You can shrink it down to the size of a marble, super small, smaller than this, right? And so you have this little, you close it. And what happens is all of those super strong emotions, they quiet down. They don't eliminate, they quiet down. And this way you can work with the information more than get stuck in the feeling of that emotion. It is such a powerful practice. And I have success 100% of the time when people learn how to do this. A couple of things that we need to pay attention. When you have this chakra down, your frequency changes. Okay, nothing is static in your body. So let's say you close the solar plexus, you close the sacral, you close the root. You're tapping into the parts of your body that are connected to the physical. You need to open the heart, the throat, and the third eye, because this is you, again, bringing the body into coherence, into a higher octave. The body is organized in 3 Dantian systems. Dantian just means collection of energy. And so the first 3 chakras are the collection of energy that master the physical. The upper chakras are the energy that's managing the energetic field of the body. So the non-physical elements of your body. The rest of them are the non-physical elements of your body, but on a higher octave of yourself. Okay. And so now when you feel the anger, you're gonna be able to tap into the information. So let's say you sit with that anger and you're gonna grab your notebook and you're gonna say, okay, what's in that anger? Resentment. Okay, so jot it down. Resentment, loneliness. Let's say abandonment. Okay, so you take the strongest of the list. And so let's say in the list, it's the feeling of abandonment. So now you're going to focus on the abandonment. And also it's going to change where in the body you're holding it. So the anger could have been here. The abandonment is up here in the heart. Okay, so you take your attention here. Everything goes here. Your chakras are still closed. Your top 3 are open. So the way you feel the emotion is going to be more faint now. It's not going to be as super overwhelming, strong anymore, but you'll be able to get the information you need. And so from that abandonment, you begin to have memories of, whoever it was that we felt abandoned. Put those aside. Don't focus on the stories. Do not get lost in the stories. Do not relive the stories. Don't repeat the stories. Just the emotion. The only thing we're concerned is the emotional information. Okay, so the abandonment, you sit with that emotion and you make a list again. Okay, so in the abandonment, you find rejection. Let's say a rejection from mother. You find disconnect, lack of touch, lack of warmth, lack of affection, lack of communication, so let's go with one of these. So you pick from here one is the strongest. Let's say it was the lack of affection, right? You didn't feel held ever as a child or as an adult. Nobody hugged you. Nobody touched you. Nobody said, I love you. I care about you. You're safe. This is going to be the secondary emotion. And so you feel this feeling of lack of touch. And in that lack of touch, you begin to uncover feelings of your own rejection to other people, your own rejection to yourself. Disgust. You might feel emotions of disgust. You might feel emotions of judgment. Okay. Now you're getting to the subconscious layer of the anger. Okay. This is amazing. This is a process. When you get to this subconscious layer, the tertiary emotion, so primary, secondary, tertiary emotion. Okay. In this model, anger is the tertiary emotion. Okay. The primary emotion is the root. So at the root, that primary emotion of, let's say disgust is the primary. When you sit with that emotion, you're going to be taken back to memories. I'm going to ask you, when is the last time you felt this emotion? last week when I was on the phone with a friend of mine, told me something terrible. Okay, how about the time before that? 5 years ago when I was in high school, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's before that? Childhood, okay? You're in your mother's womb, so you can go as far back as the womb. And when you're in the womb, you feel your mother's disgust and rejection towards something dad did. Now you're getting to the core. And what you want to understand, a couple questions you're going to ask yourself. First of all, you want to ask yourself, is this emotion yours? Okay, you want to know, is it yours or is it something that you absorbed from the person, so mom, for example, in the womb? 99% of the time, especially in the womb and in childhood, up until the ages of 7, a lot of the emotions that we feel are not ours. They are things that we have absorbed from our parents or environment. And it's extremely important to address that because, again, as I mentioned earlier, these become our perceptions of reality and our personality. So you need to understand why you took that on. As children, we're super empathic, we're loving, we're giving, we absorb everything like sponges. And so we become super identified with these emotions until we don't know the difference between a mother and yourself. You don't know the separation of that. And that enmeshment, it's called enmeshment, emotional enmeshment. It can last your entire lifetime until you're 70 years old. I have students that are 70 years old that have this kind of strong enmeshment. They don't know the difference between their own emotions and others. And so what it means is that this person has adopted this emotion as their own, and they have made all of their life decisions based on the belief systems that were taken from the other. So this is where the core work is. You need to separate yourself from what is yours, okay? And you're going to find at every 99% of the time that your little fetus self or the original essence of yourself, it never fears. It's never in separation. It knows innately that we are one with everything and that you're safe. You know that innately. And that's an absolute truth. So the second step is that you always ask, is it true? So once you identify that emotion is not yours, the rejection and the disgust and the judgment, is it true that you reject this person? Let's see how much of that is really your emotion. And you might discover, no, it's not true. Okay, so what is true? It's really important to understand what is the truth then. Because what you realize is that there's an entire consciousness that is available to you that you've always had, but we always bypass that because the trauma is more physical than that intangible consciousness. So we are breaking the old neural pathway and connecting to the consciousness. That is an ultimate truth. It's aligned with nature and natural order. Okay. What is true is that we feel insecure. Mother felt insecure and afraid of judgment. And so she did anything possible to try to reject that kind of judgment. Okay. So that's a program we took on. It's not one that is true for us. And so now we can discard it. So essential process gives you 100% power to begin to take control of your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions, and alchemize them. The alchemical process is turn what is actually true of that experience into your goal. How do you do that? That you embody the truth of that experience. So the truth is compassion. Mom needed compassion for herself. You need compassion for yourself. You need to learn how to be compassionate with your feelings of insecurity and fear that you've had all your life. And how do you hold yourself in that? So you're going to ask yourself, what's the opposite of the emotion? Okay, security. Fill your body with that feeling. Most of the time, we're not familiar with it. And so once you familiarize with yourself, you're going to make another list of positive emotions that come from this new emotion. That's how you reprogram yourself. And it's an incredibly powerful technique. And you open an entire new library. You expand the spectrum of rainbow, as I mentioned, emotional rainbow. you're moving away from just that little red and dark colors up into the purples, yellows, and oranges. Okay. And so to speak, these colors represent higher octave emotions. And from that moment forward, you begin to realize that emotions are not an enemy. They're not a danger. Your thoughts are not dangerous. Your perceptions are not dangerous. It's just a matter of compassion for yourself and others. So this is essentially how the process functions.
Well, Geraldine, this has been fantastic. I think that now would be the best time to tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jahan, for inviting me on. It was a pleasure. If you would like some support, you can reach me at GeraldineOrozco.com. I do something called DNA reprogramming and also hypnotherapy. And I'm really happy to work with you. You guys can schedule on my website. I also have a YouTube channel that I teach all of these things inside out. You guys can learn at great depth. People that have been working with me for years have had tell me that their lives have changed and just from those videos. So, I offer a lot there for free. So that's at Geraldine Orozco on YouTube. So thank you again, Jahan. It was an honor to be here.
Fantastic, Geraldine. I always enjoy our time together. The creator definitely broke the mold when he made you. And so today we are grateful for Geraldine. Thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.